Hello and hi. This is Rajesh Mode, Faculty of History, PRAGNYA IAS Academy. This is NCERT series of Class A9. In this, Chapter 1 is our French Revolution. The ideas like liberty, freedom, and equality, now we are taking for granted. But these ideas also have an history, and these ideas shaped the course of history altogether. If you take the example of French Revolution, it led to end of monarchy, and these ideas were reinterpreted and rethought in many different ways. The first chapter is on French Revolution. In this chapter, we are going to discuss five different topics. The first topic is on French society during the 18th century. The second topic, outbreak of the revolution. The third topic is on French abolishes monarchy and become republic. And the fourth topic, women have a revolution. And fifth topic, abolition of slavery. Remember the date, 14 July 1789. The city of Paris was in a state of turmoil because the king has commanded troops and to move into the city, and they opened fire upon the citizens. Some 7,000 men were gathered in the town hall and they formed what is known as a people's militia. Forming this people militia, they stormed what is known as fortress prison Bastille. Okay, this Bastille, after this event, okay, both in Paris and other side, they saw more rioting and most people protesting against the high prices of the bread. Okay, ultimately this led to execution of King of France. How and why this happened, we will discuss now. See, if you see the French society during the 18th century, see, in 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon family of kings ascended the throne of France. He was 20 years old, and when he came to the throne, he saw a empty treasure. He saw a empty treasure. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of the France, and this was the reason. Added to this, cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Under Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy, Britain. This war also added burden on the France. Okay? Yes, this was one of the reasons. One is after coming to throne, this Louis XVI, he saw a empty treasure, empty treasury, empty treasury. The reason was investment on the war and helping other colonies or American colonies to gain the independence. This has led to draining of resources to the France. And added to this, lenders who gave a credit to this France also, they also charged a high percentage of interest on approximately 10%. So this French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. Yes, and to this state was to these reasons, state was forced to increase the taxes. Okay, yet even this measure would not have sufficed. French society in the 18th century was divided into three estates, and only of the third estate paid taxes. Now I am going to explain. This is the first estate where clergy belong to. This is the second estate where nobility belong to, and this is the third estate where businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyer, and peasants and artisans and small peasants, landless laborer, and so they belong to third estate. Okay, and if you see the estates in a French society was organized, and these peasants comprises of 90% of the population, whereas 60% land were occupied by nobles, and church alone. How unequal it is, you just think. And church, clergy, and nobility, they have a privilege by birth. This clergy and nobility, they have a privilege by birth. And these nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. These include feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. And peasants were obligated to render services to the lord, to work in his house and the fields, to serve in the army, or to participate in the building roads. Okay, only peasants used to pay the taxes. So first estate and second estate were exempted from tax payments. Yeah. And whereas interestingly, this church also started extracting its share of taxes, what is known as the tax from the peasants. And added to this, these include a direct tax called daily, and a number of indirect taxes also they used to collect from the peasants. If you see livre here, see livre is unit of currency in France, discontinued in 1794. Clergy, this is the first estate, belong to group of persons invested with special functions in the church. And Titi, a tax levied by the church comprising 1/10 of the agriculture produce. Yes, these are important in this page. Next page, they draw a beautiful diagram and try to explain what is there in the French during the 18th century. See here. If you read this poor fellow brings everything grain, fruits, money, salad. The fat lord sits there ready to accept it all. Okay, he does not even care to grace him with low. This is the position in the 18th century. The struggle to survive. See, in France, population from 1715, it was 23 million. It increased to 28 million in 1789. Rising in population, okay, leads to increase in demand for food grains, and this in turn leads to increase in prices. Interestingly, wages did not keep pace with the prices, and this is the problem. Wages did not keep pace with prices, and this is the problem. Most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owner fixed their prices. Read here. Most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owner fixed the wages. So the gap between the poor and the rich widened, and things become more worse. They never drought or hail reduced the harvest. This led to subsistence crisis. What do you mean by subsistence crisis? An extreme situation where the basic means of livelihoods are endangered. Yes, this is the main. See, population increasing, it leads to increase in demand for food grains. This leads to increase in prices, whereas the wages did not keep pace with the prices. That is the problem, and it led to the subsistence crisis. And this is what it is. A growing middle class envisages an end to privileges. See, in past, the peasants and workers had participated in revolt, increasing taxes against increasing taxes and food security. But these peasants, but these peasants lack what programs, means and programs to carry out full-scale measures. See, okay, where exactly this growing middle class helped the revolt? In what way? In 18th century, witnessed the emergence of social groups termed this middle class, who earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods such as woolen and silk textiles that were either produced or brought from rich members of the society. See, all these middle class, these were educated and believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. This is very important. Rather, rather, social position, a person's social position must depend on merit. Okay? The ideas like freedom, the ideas like equal laws and opportunities for all were put forwarded by philosophers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau and also Montesquieu. Okay, these philosophers, they came up with so much ideas. I rose Locke and also Locke. Okay, Locke, in his True Treatise of Government, he sought to refute the doctrine of divine and absolute right of the monarch, whereas Rousseau, he carried the idea forwarded, proposing a form of government depends on social contract between the people and their representative. Montesquieu, in the spirit of laws, proposed division of power within the government between the legislature, executive, and judiciary. If you see now, the American constitution also it guarantees individual rights, was an important example for political thinkers in France. See, these ideas like freedom, these ideas like equal laws, these ideas like opportunities for all, these were discussed heavily in saloons, in coffee houses, and spread among the people through books and newspapers. Seeing this, Louis XVI he planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. The next topic, the outbreak of revolution. See, why Louis XVI has increased the taxes, you already know in the first topic. See, this in France, this old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose the taxes according to his will. Why? There was a political body known as a State General, which passes the proposal for new taxes. Okay, and when and how to meet this political body, it depends on the will of this monarch. Okay, but monarch altogether do not have an authority to impose the taxes. But this last time when this meeting was called on in very long period 1614, Louis XVI he called for a meeting for a state general meeting, which is a political body proposing a new taxes. Okay, where the people, members belonging from first estate, second estate, and third estate, they gathered in a hall. Okay, the representative from first estate 300 members came, representative from second estate 300 members came, representative from third estate 600 members came. Why the 600 members of the third estate, they had to stand at the back, and these representatives from the third estate, they were more educated, they were more prosperous.
But
Interestingly, women and peasants, artisans, they denied the entry. Women, peasants, and artisans, these three groups, they denied entry, but their request also accepted in paper form. Voting in estates generally in the past have been conducted and according to the principle that each state has one vote.
we saw what
This time, this Louis XVI also decided to go with the same practice that each estate had one vote only. But these members of the third estate demanded that voting now to be conducted by assembly as a whole. This third estate demanded that voting now be conducted by assembly as a whole. This voting was one of the democratic principles put forwarded by philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. While the king rejected the proposal, members of third estate walked out of the assembly in protest.
clothes.
After this event, these representatives of the third estate, they view themselves as the spokesperson for the whole French nation. This date, 20 July, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles. They declared themselves as a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. What has happened? They gathered on 20th July in the ground of Versailles tennis court, okay, and they declared a national assembly and they want to draft a constitution for France that would limit the power of the monarch. This is very important. And if you see, while the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting a constitution, the rest of France seethed with turmoil. Seethed with turmoil. And in the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. This is happening.
Didn't point with me.
Faced with power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his power would from now be checked by a constitution.
He didn't.
On the night of 4th August 1789, Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligation and taxes, and also tithes, the taxes collected by the church, abolished, and the lands owned by the church were confiscated. As a result, government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. Next topic, France became a constitutional monarch. The National Assembly completed the draft of the Constitution in 1791. Its main objective was to limit the power of the monarch. These power, instead of being concentrated in hands of one person, this is important, were now separated and assigned to different institutions like legislature, executive, and judiciary. This is important. Earlier it was earlier it was a monarch. Now this power is spread and assigned to different institutions. Different institutions: judiciary, executive, and legislature. See, the Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make the laws in the National Assembly, which was indirectly elected. That is, citizens voted for a group of electors who in turn choose the assembly. Not interestingly, not all citizens had a right to vote. Men only above 25 years of age who paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of their labor wage were given the status of active citizens. That is, they were entitled to vote. They were passive citizens and they were active citizens. Okay, these active citizens only entitled to vote. Okay, not the passive citizens. Interestingly, to qualify as an elector and then as a member of assembly, a man had to belong to highest brackets of taxpayers. Then only he is eligible to pay, then only he is eligible to vote.
That that's
The Constitution began with Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, rights such as a right to life and a freedom of speech and freedom of opinion, equality before law. These were established as a natural and inalienable rights. That is, it is state also cannot taken away this. They belong to each human being by birth and could not be taken away. It is the duty of the state to protect each citizen and citizens' natural rights.
privately sector country. The people are okay.
See, majority of the men and women in the 18th century, they could not able to read or write. So images and symbols were frequently used instead of printed words to communicate important ideas. The paintings such as the broken chain, which symbolizes the stands for act of becoming free, act of becoming free. The bundle of rods means strength lies in unity. The eye with triangle radiating light. The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. And sceptre is a symbol of royal power. Snake biting its tail to form a ring means a ring has neither beginning nor end and is a symbol of eternity. Red, 5 cap, cap worn by a slave upon becoming free. Blue, white, red, the national colors of France. The winged woman, personification of law. And the law tablet, this law is same for all, and all are equal before it. France third topic. France abolishes monarchy and become a republic. You know, this Louis XVI has signed the constitution and he entered into secret negotiations with the king of Prussia. You know, in before this could happen, this National Assembly voted in 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. They saw this as a war of people against kings and aristocrats all over Europe. See here,
That's
it very important. Large section of the population were convinced that the revolution had to be carried further as the constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer sections of the society that we already discussed. Okay, the most political clubs become an important rally point for the people who wish to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of action. The most successful of these clubs was that of the Jacobians, which got its name from the former Covenant of Saint Jacob in Paris. See, here it is important. The members of the Jacobean Club belonged mainly to the less prosperous sections of the society. They include the shopkeepers, they include the artisans, they include shoemakers. Okay? A large group among the Jacobians decided to start wearing long striped trousers similar to those worn by the dock workers. Okay? See here, next page. These
And they're cool.
these Jacobians came to be known as San Clotos, literally meaning those without knee breeches. Okay. In the summer of 1792, the Jacobians planned an insurrection of a large number of Persians who were angered by the short supplies and high prices of food. On the morning 10th August, they stormed the palace of Tuileries, massacred the king guards, and held the king himself as hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family.
And
This, the newly elected assembly was called the convention. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic.
but you know, it can go.
Now there is no hereditary monarchy. Now hereditary monarchy. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by a court on the charge of treason. Treason means betrayal of one's country or government. On 21st January 1793, he was executed publicly at the Palace de la Concorde. Okay, the reign of terror. The period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as Reign of Terror. Robespierre followed a policy, what is known as a policy of severe control and punishment. All those who he saw as being enemies of the republic, like ex-nobles and clergy, members of other political parties, even members of his own party, did not agree with his methods, were arrested, imprisoned, and they tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If the court find them guilty, they were guillotined. What do you mean by guillotine? Guillotine means cutting the head. Guillotine is a device consisting of two holes and a blade with which a person is beheaded. It was named after Dr. Guillotine. Robespierre's government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices. Meat and bread were rationed. Peasants were forced to transport their grains to the cities and sell it to the prices fixed by the government. See here.
How will you go? And that's it. Yeah.
Robespierre pursued his policies so relentlessly that even supporters began to demand moderation. Finally, he was convicted by a court in July 1794, where he was arrested and on the next day sent to guillotine. A directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobean government allowed the wealthier middle class to seize the power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non-propertied sections of the society. It provided for two elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of five members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in one man executive as under the Jacobians. However, the directors often clashed with the legislature councils, whom then sought to dismiss them. The political instability, see here, very important. The political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. Through all these changes in form of government, the ideals of freedom, equality before the law, and fraternity remained inspiring ideals that motivated political movements in France and the rest of during the following century. Did women have a revolution? Parisians women on their way to Versailles. From the very beginning, women were active participants in the events which brought about so many important changes in French society. Most women of the third estate had to work for living. Most women of their third estate had to work for living. They worked as seamstresses or laundresses, sold flowers, fruits and vegetables at the market, or were employed as domestic servants in the houses of prosperous people. Most women did not have access to education or job training, and also working women had also to take care for their families, that is to cook, fetch water, bread, look after the children. And in order to discuss and voice their interest, women started their own political clubs and newspapers. About 60 women clubs came up in different French cities. Their main demand was same political rights as men. Women were disappointed that the Constitution of 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. I already discussed what about active and passive citizens. They demanded now right to vote as a natural right, to be elected to assembly and to hold political office. Yes. In the early years, revolutionary government did introduce laws that helped improve the lives of the women. Together with the creation of state schools, schooling was made compulsory for all girls. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. Marriage was made into a contract entered into freely and registered under civil laws. Divorce was made legal and could be applied for by both men and women. Women movements for voting right and equal wages continued through the next 200 years in many countries of the world. The fight for the vote was carried out through an international suffrage movement during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was finally in 1946 that women in France won the right to vote. Next, the abolition of slavery. One of the most revolutionary social reform of the Jacobean regime was abolition of slavery in French colonies. The colonies in the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. But the reluctance of Europeans to go and work in distant and unfamiliar lands meant a shortage of labor on the plantations. So this was met by a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and America. And the slave trade began in the 17th century, and French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux to the African coast, where they brought slaves from local chieftains. See here. The exploitation of slaves, labor, slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European market for sugar, coffee, and indigo. The National Assembly held long debates about whether the rights of man should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies. But it did not pass any law. And finally, the convention, which is 1794, legislated to free all slaves in the French overseas possession. And Napoleon reintroduced slavery. Plantation owners understood their freedom as including the right to enslave.
Yeah. Yeah, I revolution also think
The revolution and everyday life.
that I'm not keen.
The revolutionary governments The revolutionary governments took it up themselves to pass the laws that would translate the ideas of liberty and equality into everyday practice. One of the important laws that came into effect soon after the storming of Bastille in the summer 1789 was abolition of censorship. This was one of the law. In the old regime, all written material and cultural activities published only after they have been approved by kings. Now, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens proclaimed
Maybe
freedom of speech and expression to be a natural right. Here, now the Declaration of Rights of Men and Citizens proclaimed freedom of speech and expression to be a natural line. Each side sought to convince the others of its position through the medium of prints, plays, songs, and the festive processions attracted large number of people. This was one way they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty, justice. The political philosophers wrote about at length in text which only a handful of educated people could read. And conclusion, in 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries, dispossessing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. Napoleon saw his role as modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as production of private property, and a uniform system of weights and measures provided by decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the people, but soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as invading force. He was finally defeated in Waterloo 1815. Many of his measures that carried by revolutionary ideas of liberty and modern laws to other parts of Europe had an impact on people after the Napoleon left. The ideas of liberty and democratic rights were most important legacy of French Revolution. And people colonized people reworked the ideas of freedom from bondage into their movements to create a sovereign nation state. In India, Tipu and Raja Rammohan Roy are the two great examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from French Revolution. Thank you very much.